Okay, so before I start, I just want to say that if you're planning to play either NieR game and you haven't been spoiled on their stories yet, then I highly recommend you actually don't watch this video, because the experiences I had with NieR Replicant and NieR Tomato are some of the most memorable and emotional ones I've had with a video game, and I'd rather you play through the games on your own instead of potentially ruining some really powerful gamer moments for yourself by watching this video of my poorly formed opinions. Okay, so for the two people that are still here, let's talk about tomatoes. Many of you can probably guess that I'm a huge fan of NieR Automata. I mention the game quite frequently in my videos, I own the fucking book, I have a bunch of prints of A2 all over my room. If you couldn't tell, I'm borderline obsessed with this game. So it probably goes without saying that, like many fans of its sequel, I've been playing the shit out of the NieR Replicant remake. Anyone who's played a NieR game before would know that you have to play through a bunch of different routes in a certain order before you can see the true ending of the game and the ultimate conclusion to the story. And as I was playing through the many routes of NieR Replicant version 1.2247448 pi r square, there was one word that kept popping up in my head: replayability and sadness. Actually, probably mostly sadness. But for the people who don't know, Route B of both NieR games require the player to replay a large chunk of the game that they've already seen before. This, and the fact that there are a bunch of endings that the game presents in a specific order, is why replaying a NieR game can be kind of an ambiguous statement. Because does one playthrough mean seeing just one ending, or does it mean seeing all the endings and playing through every single route? Most fans, including myself, probably think it's the latter, but there is a noticeable chunk of people who seem to think otherwise. But regardless of which category you fall under, it's undeniable that replayability is still a big factor of your enjoyment in Route B, given how similar it is to Route A in terms of its levels and missions. Which is why I think that in order to really understand the game's unconventional structure, it's important to figure out what makes the events of Route A worth replaying in Route B. Replayability comes in many different forms. You see, in many roly-poly role-playing games, you might have a bunch of different endings and choices for the player to make which will drastically change the overall narrative. You got games like Fallout New Vegas and The Outer Worlds, where you can build your character a million different ways and play through the same game with entirely different tools which make for a completely new experience. Some games don't even need to change anything at all. Doom Eternal, Dark Souls 3, Sekiro. All these games have combat that get you higher than any drug on the planet, so you keep coming back for more. Roguelike. Even if you've beaten the game, every run is completely random, and you get a ton of unlockables and other incentives for you to keep playing, over and above the gameplay being more fun than popping bubble wrap. There's so many other niche and unique reasons to replay games. Maybe you missed out on some social links in Persona 5 and ran out of time, so you want to complete them in New Game Plus. Maybe you're terrible at Hades, but you just like walking around the house and talking to the characters after each run. You could also just really like replaying this one mission from Halo 2 because it lets you use the Scorpion tank. Don't ask me why these are so oddly specific. A very common and obvious way many games try to achieve replayability is by having some kind of variation in a second playthrough. It could be through its story, gameplay, hidden content, level design. Something has to be different. But NieR games are like, fuck that. The only thing we're gonna change is you and your perception of our fucking story and characters. I'm sorry, that probably came across as kind of aggressive. Unlike many story-driven games which often depend on giving the player choices to influence and change the narrative, Route B of both NieR games opt to instead just add on to the existing story already presented in Route A, but still manage to offer an entirely different experience because they take your preconceptions about that story and flush them down to goddamn toilet. I'm getting aggressive again, I'm sorry. In Replicant, there's a big reveal at the end of Route A about everyone actually just being a shell of a person and the real humans being the shades that you killed throughout the game. Route B then expands on this plot point further by showing you these tragic backstories of shades that NieR will eventually slaughter without thinking twice, and completely recontextualizes moments like this room, where the first time around you were in it was just like, oh wow, what a fun combat encounter, guys, let's beat up the bad guys with the power of friendship. But now it's, oh god, he's killing all the children, oh god, why? While it's true that on a surface level, these extra cutscenes and dialogue do serve the purpose of giving the player something new to chew on, the game's ability to go from, damn, what a nice touching story about a guy trying to save his sister, to, wow, I feel like a horrible person now, and make the player go through two completely different experiences without even changing shit about the overarching plot itself, is what really makes playing through Route B of the game a lot more meaningful. Anyone who's seen all the endings of Replicant will most likely tell you that the way they saw this guy in Route A compared to how they saw him in Route B were completely different. Having the knowledge of the game's ending as well as the way the game presents to you how the enemies you cut down without any consideration actually have a purpose to fight and live, one of them even being the exact same one as the main character, will probably at least make you question the actions your character is taking and their true implications. The entire narrative gets completely warped and no two people will interpret this the exact same way, which is why I find this design choice to be so fascinating. To some people, this could be a story about how someone's seemingly heroic actions can actually be harmful in the grand scheme of things. Maybe you think it's meant to convey how someone can always find a reason to live through the other people in their life. Maybe it could also be a story about the consequences of people dehumanizing others without thinking. Or maybe you still just think it's a story about a guy trying to save his sister and going on this pointless journey just to fail miserably. There's so many ways to look at it and so many things to consider, and even the big man Yoko Taro himself says that you're free to interpret the game in whatever way you want. What's interesting is that he also mentioned in an interview that one of the reasons he includes the deletion of save data into the structure of his games is because he wants it to be something that can only be experienced by someone who's invested a bunch of time into the game. The fact that you have to take the effort to replay a chunk of the game over and over again in order to see its true ending probably feels like a chore to many people, but while the repetitive nature of the game could definitely be considered a flaw, it also seems to be there by design and does add much more weight to some of the game's crucial moments. By the time you reach ending D of Replicant, you've played through the second half of the game at least 3 times, so when the game asks you if you want to delete all your save files and sacrifice yourself for Kaine, it's basically talking to you, the player, directly, asking if you think saving this lady over here is worth all that time you spent playing through the game over and over again. And spoilers, the correct answer is yes. Even in Automata, where the deletion of save data is optional, after watching ending D, I remember just thinking to myself, damn, I really just spent all that extra time playing through the first part as 9S again, just to see all the characters I like go through nothing but hardship and then die. What the fuck? But when the credits froze and I was given a chance to save those characters in ending E, making this seemingly obvious choice became such an emotional experience because I'd spent so much time in this game's world and grown to understand and sympathize with its characters so much. There's so many other ways to think about why the game structure is the way it is, and fans of Tomatoes are still breaking down how the complex themes being presented tie into the game's unique structure, but at its core, these powerful moments the game creates using both its structure and its story are something I feel that anyone can appreciate, even if you're someone like me who isn't that much of an expert at writing or storytelling. As much as I enjoyed my time with NieR Replicant's remake, it is still definitely far from being a perfect game. You have to play through the entirety of Route B all over again and do the exact same shit on top of hunting down all the weapons just to see ending C or D, which I felt was a bit much. It's kind of disappointing that the combat didn't have nearly as much depth as it did in Automata. I get that they wanted to remain as true to the original as possible, but if it had that same Platinum Games level of polish, I honestly think that more people would have been willing to spend more time on it and go through all the routes. Also, yes, that nearly pun was intended. And as unique and interesting of an experience Route B is, I can definitely agree with the notion that the gameplay itself becomes pretty monotonous, because apart from the few extra cutscenes and lines, everything else in terms of gameplay pretty much doesn't change. I do think Automata improved a lot on the game's formula, which I guess isn't very surprising because it's a sequel, but over and above doing similar things Replicant did with its story in Route B, it introduces a bunch of new things like 9S's side quests and an entirely new second act in Route C that unlocks after ending B so that you get more out of replaying the game besides this. Which was actually really just more of this, but still. The addition of a chapter select after finishing either ending C or D was also the greatest shit ever. Definitely appreciate it. You might be wondering why I chose not to talk about Automata as much in this video, and it's really just because I personally felt that a bulk of my emotional experience with that game came from Route C instead of Route B. Regardless of how good a game is or how replayable it is, there's always a certain point where you start to get diminishing returns in your enjoyment, which usually occurs towards the end or after completing the game once. And in the case of NieR games, for a good number of people, it seems that this happened at the end of Route A or halfway through Route B, which is kind of a shame, but there are a lot of ways to improve on the game's formula to circumvent this, and I hope they'll continue to improve on that if they ever make another title for the series. I'm really glad Replicant got a remake and that I was able to experience it for myself after enjoying the crap out of Automata. It's nice to see Replicant being received much better than it originally was in 2010. I think people are more open to games as an art form nowadays and are probably also more willing to give Replicant a chance given Automata's success. On a whole, NieR games are definitely a mixed bag, and not everyone is going to be able to appreciate them as much as myself and all the other diehard fans out there, and I don't claim to be some expert at writing or game design that can fully understand a director's vision, but goddamn, some of the most special memories I have in gaming came from this series, and I'm so glad I decided to try Automata on a whim 4 years ago. Fun fact, I've rewritten the script for this video a total of 3 times because I'm a dumbo who can't convey his thoughts very well. I hope you found this entertaining in some way, or maybe thought it was stupid and nothing I said made any sense, but either way, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to watch this till the end. If you did find this video entertaining, your like or share would be greatly appreciated. Feel free to check out some of the other shit on my channel and subscribe if you want to see more of me trying to talk about video games without sounding like a crazy person. I got a Twitter if you want to follow me on there. The rest of my links are probably on the screen somewhere too, so you can check those out if you want. Thank you again for watching my video. Until we see each other again.